Tonight, facing a possible COVID surge, Joe Biden lays out his plan to fight the pandemic, while a Supreme Court justice sounds the alarm over past restrictions. And despite recent reforms, allegations of abuse and mistreatment of women among one of America's most strategic Middle East allies. Plus, is the fallout surrounding the election the greatest hour for the church?
And the only deciding factor that is going to change this moment in history is the church.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. COVID cases on the rise across the globe and here in the United States. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Well, more than 1 million cases have been confirmed this month alone, with Joe Biden now making this a top priority as he prepares to assume the role of president. Faith Nation co-anchor Jenna Browder has tonight's top story.
Vice President Joe Biden is laying out his plan to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. This week, his transition team announced a new coronavirus task force that includes doctors, researchers, and public health experts. He also announced a 7-point plan to tackle the crisis. So what does that mean for you and me? Well, first, Biden wants to implement a mask mandate nationwide. According to the Biden-Harris official transition website, Biden plans to personally call mayors and governors to encourage mask mandates. But it looks like all 16 Republican governors who oppose statewide mask mandates are ready to reject Biden's plea. This, according to Politico. Second, quicker and free COVID-19 testing. That means increasing the number of drive-through test sites and investing in technology for at-home testing. Third, paid sick leave. Biden wants to give emergency paid leave for anyone who gets COVID-19 or is caring for someone with the virus. And finally, Biden's plan includes working with the CDC to increase or loosen up restrictions for communities based on research and relative risk. This includes determining when to open or close schools. And last night at a public health forum at the National Cathedral, we heard from one of those members on Biden's coronavirus task force, Dr. Luciana Borio. She says these restrictions do not need to go as far as lockdowns.
When we implement public health measures that are prudent and consistently, we're able to contain the outbreak. In the absence, without having to do lockdowns. In a lockdown, a lot of measures are curtailed that do not need to be curtailed because they don't really offer an advantage to containing the epidemic. But I think it's fact that the American public is tired and they're confused about what really needs to be done.
And this week, Biden also announced Ron Klain as his chief of staff, another signal that COVID-19 will be central to the early days of this administration. Klain was the Ebola czar under the Obama administration. And it's worth noting, he said the Obama administration did, quote, everything wrong with its handling of the H1N1 pandemic. The only saving grace, he said, is that it wasn't that deadly. So Klain is getting some criticism for that. Hopefully a lesson learned as they get ready to take on the coronavirus pandemic. John?
All right. Thank you, Jenna. Great to see you. Well, meanwhile, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito expressing concern over COVID-19 restrictions, saying they're an alarming example of how government can quickly abuse regulatory authority. He told the Federalist Society religious freedom is among the constitutional rights being threatened in current culture.
It pains me to say this, but in certain quarters, religious liberty is fast becoming a disfavored right.
Alito was also critical of 2 cases this year where the High Court imposed restrictions on religious gatherings. Another case filed by the Roman Catholic Diocese in Brooklyn is pending. Well, as the number of coronavirus cases nationwide soar, cities and states are beginning to clamp down again like they did last spring, only this time we're much closer to a vaccine. 160,000 new cases were reported on Thursday. That set a record. After a startling increase in positive cases, the mayor of Chicago is asking residents to leave home only for essential activity and to limit social gatherings to just 10 people. Similar restrictions in California, now second only to Texas in reaching 1 million cases. In New York, the governor there ordered all bars, restaurants, and gyms to close by 10 p.m. Meanwhile, promising news as Pfizer says its COVID vaccine is 90% effective and wants to distribute it soon. Drug maker Moderna may not be far behind.
The good news about vaccines means that if we hunker down for another 6 or 8 months, we may be in a much, much better place next year.
In the meantime, health officials urge vigilance as the CDC predicts that by the end of Thanksgiving weekend, at least 250,000 Americans will have died from COVID. Well, as Joe Biden moves forward with presidential transition plans, President Donald Trump and his supporters refused to concede the election. The president told the Washington Examiner that he's confident he'll reach 270 electoral votes by winning the states needed to achieve that total, claiming, quote, "We're going to win Wisconsin. Arizona, it'll be down to 8,000 votes, and if we can do an audit of the millions of votes, we'll find 8,000 votes easy. If we can do an audit, we'll be in good shape." Meanwhile, Lou Dobbs of the Fox Business Network tweeted that the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says he has uncovered enough unlawful ballots in Pennsylvania and Michigan to turn the election in favor of Donald Trump. Another idea gaining traction in politics is the idea of a so-called Trump purge of any and all Trump supporters in government and politics, presuming an incoming Biden administration in January. Here with more on that is Jarrett Stepman of the Heritage Foundation. Welcome, Jarrett.
Thank you very much.
Well, Jarrett, you wrote about the so-called Trump purge. Tell us what you're seeing and hearing about that.
Yeah, this is something that obviously it's been going around social media quite a bit, but it's something that's been promoted, especially by many left-wing politicians, Democratic staffers, is the so-called Trump Accountability Project, which essentially makes a list of people who not only work for the Trump administration, but anybody associated with the Trump administration. We're talking donors, we're talking contractors, to essentially no longer telling people to no longer do business with them, to no longer have any association with them. I think we've seen a number of calls from a number of activists and politicians to essentially purge those who friendly to the Trump administration, no longer dealing with them in civil society. This despite the fact that Vice President Joe Biden has called for unity following this election.
Jarrett, how do you reconcile the disconnect if Joe Biden is calling for unity, but you have others who are saying, hey, let's purge these so-called Trump supporters? How do you reconcile that in a democracy where you have a full-fledged debate of competing ideas?
Yeah, that is a deep problem. I think it flies in the face of Thomas Jefferson's first inaugural when he said we're all Republicans, we're all Federalists, referring to the parties at the time, saying that we're really all Americans here, that those who believe in the Republic is something, idea that's accepted across the board. I think you have this growing belief that simply if you disagree with people politically, they must be eliminated and liquidated. They must be removed from society, never to be seen again. And I think you see that growing, especially on the hard left that does have such power in America's most potent political and cultural institutions in this country. I think that's really where a lot of this is coming from. Biden has the problem that while he ran on sort of being more moderate than the general Democratic base, that base is very angry. It demands purges. It demands retribution. He's going to have a lot of trouble balancing his message with what is the common sentiment with a lot of his allies, with a lot of the people who ultimately supported him.
Jarrett, and how is this harmful to society?
It's deeply harmful. It's this idea that it's really us versus them. We're a nation of enemies, not fellow Americans. And I think that is becoming certainly over the last few decades, there's all this talk of increasing partisanship and ideological separation, but this is really happening, and it's happening at the same time. Right. We have this prevailing cancel culture where people are simply canceled because of something they said. And I think it's very worrying in a country of free speech and free debate.
Real quickly, I'd like to squeeze in one last question. With the way things stand in the House and Senate, do you see another contentious 4 years, or is there a chance lawmakers can find a way to work together for the good of the nation in about 20 seconds?
I think it's going to be a very contentious 4 years. And I think if Biden does ultimately become president, I think there's going to be a lot of battles with him in a Senate and House that may see more Republican gains. And I think you're going to have a lot of the pen and phone presidency.
All right, Jarrett Stepman, we are out of time. Thank you so much. Jarrett Stepman with the Heritage Foundation. Well, with the wake of the election leaving many divided, including Christians, whether they believe it's not over or that it is time to move on, most can agree it is a critical moment for the church, no matter the outcome. Wendy Griffith brings us that story.
This is the greatest hour of the church.
Prophet Charlie Shamp told the Elijah List Steve Schultz recently,
the justice scale is resting in the center, the heart of the nation. And it is either going to go one way or the other way. And the only deciding factor that is going to change this moment in history is the church. The church has to rise, take hold of the prophetic word, decree it, and do not let go of it. And we will tip the scales of justice.
Some Christians question, if God has already spoken, why do we need to pray? Dutch Sheets, author of Intercessory Prayer and many other books, says,
don't buy into that theology that says, well, God's just in control and he's predestined everything and he's going to get it done anyway. No, God needs our prayers. He's using our prayers, and therefore they matter. And that means, listen, be a part of prayer meetings. Get on prayer calls.
Sheets adds, this is not the time to get discouraged.
Don't be surprised that the enemy is fighting this. Daniel, even though God had heard his prayer for the restoration of Israel and released angels immediately to start working to bring forth the answer to Daniel, Daniel had to fast and pray for 3 more weeks, 21 days, against a principality over Persia before the battle could be won in the invisible realm.
Reverend Robert Jeffress, a faith advisor to President Trump, calls this a rubber meets the road moment for Christians.
Over the last 4 years, we've told people that you need to respect the governing authorities. We quote Paul in Romans 13, who says there's no government authority that exists that hasn't been established by God. And when Paul wrote that, remember, Nero, the evil emperor of Rome, was on the throne, and he was the one who ultimately beheaded the Apostle Paul. And yet Paul would say Nero's there by God's permission.
Still, others, like Prophet Jeff Jansen told Sid Roth, the church will have the final say in this election.
We need to lift our voices, to have our voices counted in the courts of heaven, to be able to release the verdict that God wants. God is looking for someone to agree with him on the planet, and that's the church.
There's a saying, as the church goes, so goes the nation. And many believe that statement has never been more true. Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
Thanks, Wendy. Some good reminders there. Coming up, how some of the top issues Christians are concerned about could change under a Biden administration.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. Well, as you're well aware, it's been another whirlwind week with a lot of news. Here to break it all down for us, David Brody, CBN Chief Political Analyst. David, always great to see you. First of all, President Trump and his supporters continue to contest certain vote counts. The president is predicting something big is about to happen. David, what can we expect here?
Well, let's wait and see what the big is, John, exactly. I mean, the president is talking a good game. His campaign is talking a good game, but we don't know exactly what the big smoking gun is. I mean, is it the Dominion voting systems? At this point, we have to wait and see. I talked to Aaron Perini, one of the deputy press secretaries over at the Trump campaign today. They obviously have filed a lawsuit in Michigan, but other than Michigan, they're not really filing in any other states. So, I think it remains to be seen whether or not this is going to go, how far this can go. I will say that this idea that we have seen the last of all the lawsuits, and I mean, this is going to drag out for a very long time. I expect it to go at least until mid-December.
David, later today we heard that Georgia was indeed called for Joe Biden. North Carolina called for President Trump. On the other side, with Biden still the presumed winner here, he's moving forward. When it comes to the issue of life or America's close alliance with Israel and how that affects things like Iran, these are all major concerns for Christians. How do these play out, David?
Well, it's going to be a total 180. So congratulations, America. I mean, the folks that voted for Joe Biden, and there were many evangelical Christians and Catholics as well that voted for Joe Biden. So folks, the believers of faith in that regard are going to get Joe Biden's policies. And Joe Biden's policies are going to re-up with Iran and the Iran nuclear deal. Most likely that will start again. On the life issue, there's going to be more access to contraception. There'll be more funding for Planned Parenthood. There'll be a reversal of the Mexico City policy, which outlawed abortions overseas. That'll be gone. So it's going to be the whole kit and caboodle. Everything that Donald Trump did from an executive order with the stroke of a pen.
David, I got a little bit of a two-parter here for you. There's grassroots conservative support for the audits and the recounts. They say it's not solely about President Trump, but about fair elections. Meanwhile, the calls for recounts at the top of the ballot, critics contend, flies in the face of Republicans' strong Election Day gains, where they made gains in the House and they're keeping the Senate. How do they square that argument?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things they're saying, a couple things. One, they're saying, look, Joe Biden, this is a guy that there's no way that you can vote for you can vote for Biden and then go ahead and vote for Republicans down ballot. It doesn't make any sense. What they're contending, the Trump administration or Trump campaign is contending, is that many of these ballots were either they're no good, they're illegal. And in other words, they're trying to say, how do you get 30, 40, 50,000 votes in a row? And once again, you have to show the evidence, but a batch of votes that only check Joe Biden and don't check any of the down ballot candidates. So that's kind of their view. I will say this on the grassroots issue, John, let's wait and see what happens in D.C. this weekend. There are 2 or 3 big pro-Trump rallies, tens of thousands expected, maybe even more, could be into the hundreds of thousands. It'll be interesting when we talk Monday morning to see what that grassroots appeal does to the conversation and if folks in America take notice. Because if MAGA Nation's upset, I think we're going to know about it this weekend.
All right, a little bit of another tease there. Great tease, David. CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, have a great weekend.
You too, John.
Well, still ahead, treating women as equals in one Middle Eastern nation. What leaders are doing and what still needs to be done.
Too often we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com to get your copy today.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Welcome back. Women in Saudi Arabia have gained more freedoms in recent years. Still, some say Islam and its tenets severely restrict their rights, especially under what's known as the guardianship system. CBN's George Thomas takes a closer look at a system which many say renders Saudi women as second-class citizens.
Here to describe the guardianship laws and how they severely restrict religious freedom and the rights of women in Saudi Arabia is Gail Manchin, chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Thanks for coming on the show. Gail, can you explain the guardianship system?
Certainly. Guardianship refers to rules, laws, judicial decisions that severely restrict all women so that the men to totally control their lives, who they marry, where they live, and it's all strictly based on Sunni Islam. So it has nothing to do with the individual's religion.
A Saudi woman reportedly once said, "We all have to live in the borders of the boxes our dads or husbands draw for us." These laws affect every Saudi woman, irrespective of her economic or social class, right?
Absolutely. Saudi Arabia actually criminalized domestic violence. However, if a woman tries to leave an abusive relationship, they will use her religious freedom. I mean, they restrict her religious freedom and use that pretense to actually invest funds to bring her back into this abusive household.
What are Saudi women doing to repeal these laws, and what happens, Gail, when they speak out against it?
Well, unfortunately, and of course, I do want to say that Saudi has made some changes. Women are allowed to drive. They're allowed to travel abroad. They're allowed to list births and deaths in their family. And we commend that. So it shows that Saudi can change and reform their laws. But unfortunately, women who speak out against these abusive laws, these restrictions, are thrown into prison and have been treated horribly. And in fact, so we certainly call for people that have been harassed and subject to this mistreatment for them to be released.
How do guardianship laws affect religious freedom?
They use religion as a way to get around, as I used as that example with domestic violence. They actually use religion as a loophole to bring women back to their husbands into an abusive relationship. So it's unfortunate. And see, that is actually a total it's totally against the United Nations human rights Declaration, Article 18, that says you cannot do that.
All right, Gail, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Coming up, images of hope for America in the middle of unrest and uncertainty as Christians answer the call to pray.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Watch On the Home Front today at 2:30. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
Well, finally tonight, for years we've seen growing unrest and division in America, especially after the election. But here's a different image you might not see anywhere else. A group of Trump supporters and counter-protesters actually praying together at a rally after the election. We close tonight with more scenes like these, only on Faith Nation, as people pray for a united States of America.